If this is your first episode, this is a warning it'll be a little different than past episodes, but it will also be a good way to hear what this show is about. Does that make sense? Don't worry, it will. On the day I'm recording it, it is currently my birthday. It's the 9th time I am turning 27, or 35 if you want to rub it in. And one of the great things about social media is getting birthday wishes from all over the world. So really, I've been celebrating for 36 hours. One message came from Rhett from the Wallfly podcast, who wished me a happy birthday and joked about the story behind Emily. But since I hadn't really planned ahead for this week's episode, I thought it was a great idea, so thanks, Rhett. This might seem like a little bit of a vanity episode, and you're more than welcome to skip it. But as I've found with podcasts I listen to, I really love learning about the hosts, so I hope you'll enjoy this. I'm your host, Emily Prokop, and this is the story behind Emily Prokop. But first, a quick message from Livestream for the Cure. And if you want to get me a belated birthday present, I would love it if you went to livestreamforthecure.com and donated to my friends, the Epic Film Guys, who are raising money for cancer research.
I'm Nick.
And I'm Justin. We are the Epic Film Guys, and we'd like just a moment of your time to talk about an extremely important event coming up this May.
Last year, we hosted the Livestream for the Cure, a 12-hour live stream fundraiser where we raised $2,500 for the Cancer Research Institute. 86
cents out of every dollar raised goes to research toward finding a cure.
And this year, we're aiming to smash that goal, and we need your help to do it.
Join us from May 18th through the 20th for 30 hours of amazing live stream content from us and a whole host of amazing podcasters who will be joining us to try to reach $5,000.
For more information, please visit www.livestreamforthecure.com. Together, we can make a difference.
I was born in Danbury, Connecticut, which we actually talked about in the story behind Mad Hatters. Danbury, Connecticut was known the world over as Hat City because of the number of hats manufactured there. And they even coined the term Danbury Shakes for the symptom, which the Board of Health knew about, but didn't do much to stop the use of mercury because it wasn't affecting anyone else in the town, other than the hat workers. Side note, I was born way after the Hatters in Danbury were going mad. By the time I was born, the city already knew the dangers of mercury. But since it was the 80s, my parents and their friends were probably still reading horoscopes in newspapers and seeing how the planet Mercury affected them. Oh, like we talked about in the story behind Mercury retrograde. And the popularity came about again in the 70s when newspapers began printing horoscope, with Mercury becoming associated with bad omens. Anyway, back to being born. My family is basically from all over Europe, but the biggest nationalities are Hungarian from one of my great-grandmothers, and another one of my great-grandmothers came over from Ireland, which we talked about in the story behind Luck of the Irish. If you think the Irish are inherently more lucky than other nationalities, you may be surprised to find out that Luck of the Irish is actually more of a sarcastic expression. As a kid, I basically had a different answer to the "what do you want to be when you grow up" question every week. But the main ones were either a writer or an actress, as you can probably tell from the story behind the musical. For episode 100, I came up with doing musicals. I hope you learned a bit and all my rhymes weren't inexcusable. The history is quite large and certain facts might be disputable. This is the story all about the modern major musical. But I once wrote Steven Spielberg a letter telling him how much I loved being in shows and that I thought I could be the next Drew Barrymore if he ever had another movie like E.T. he needed a little girl for. He never wrote back, and I've kind of held a little grudge against him ever since. And you know what? We talked about E.T. in the story behind Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. Reese's Pieces came into their own burst of popularity following being featured in the 1982 Steven Spielberg movie E.T., when Spielberg couldn't use M&Ms like he had originally intended. I also wanted to be an artist. I love the idea of being a Renaissance woman, but my art skills were not like those of Leonardo da Vinci, who we talked about in this story behind the Mona Lisa. In 2005, a letter to an acquaintance of da Vinci's from 1503 confirmed he was, in fact, working on a portrait of Del Giocondo. There are theories that the painting could also be of an unnamed courtesan, Princess Isabella of Naples, Da Vinci himself, his mother, or his apprentice Salai, who is said to have been Da Vinci's lover. But really, I loved writing. Well, except term papers and reports. But writing for fun and storytelling was always something that I really loved. When I went to college, originally I was an English major, but once I took all the writing classes and had to take the literature classes, I kind of hated having assigned reading. I was lucky enough to have taken a journalism class as part of my general education requirements and fell in love with it, and I switched my major. I became so involved in journalism, I was part of the Society of Professional Journalists, which, lucky for me, I joined the year the annual conference was in Las Vegas. We talked about Las Vegas in the Story Behind Las Vegas, too. The first wedding chapel on the Strip was established in 1942, called the Little Church of the West. And Vegas has since become a running theme among sitcoms and movies for on-the-fly weddings. And as someone who has done 2 of them, I can attest, both times I was getting married, I looked at my future spouse and said, "This is too hard. Let's just elope to Vegas." Speaking of weddings, I met both my first and second husbands in college. My first marriage didn't work out, not for lack of trying, even doing many of the things we talked about in the Story Behind Wedding Luck and Superstitions. I'm going to channel some 90s angry female singing for a bit and start off with why rain on your wedding day is considered lucky. And by the way, Alanis Morissette, it's not ironic, it's a coincidence. But from that marriage, I have an amazing daughter, and my ex-husband and I remain friends, and he's even helped me out with a few episodes since he's a teacher. My second marriage is to a guy I met on my college newspaper. Since we were both journalism majors, we totally geek out about anything journalism, or First Amendment related. But marrying him meant I was also marrying a hockey fanatic, and he even made an appearance in the Story Behind the Stanley Cup.
The Rangers win in 1994 was my big awakening as a hockey fan. I was 9 years old and just becoming a Rangers fan during that run. However, after that victory, the New York Rangers players did a lot of things with the cup that 9-year-old me would not be allowed to hear about.
So now we have our son, who I was pregnant with when I started this show, and who inspired a few episodes, like the story behind lullabies. Lullabies have been around as early as 2000 BC. On a palm-sized clay tablet dating back to ancient Babylonia, or modern-day Iraq, is a lullaby written in cuneiform script. The lyrics actually warn the child to quiet down, or else a demon will wake up and eat him. After college, I worked at a newspaper, then for WWE magazine. Yeah, that WWE. Then another newspaper, and then as a puzzle book editor. But once I discovered podcasts, I became obsessed pretty quickly with them. Very similar to what we talked about in the Story Behind podcasts. Podcast listening has been growing year after year, but one of the great things is once people discover podcasts, especially ones they love, they want to tell everyone about it. Kind of like, where has this been all my life? A few years later, I had the wine-inspired idea to start one of my own. Welcome to the Classy Little Podcast. We're your hosts.
I'm James.
I'm Emily. And after we ended that one, it took a few months before coming up with another idea for a show I wanted to do. And thanks to Nick from the Epic Film Guys, who got me behind the mic again. In fact, the idea came to me one day when I was pregnant and I got a craving for pink lemonade of all things. And my ADHD mind started to wonder, what makes it pink? Oh, we talked about that in the story behind 30 Random Things. There are 2 theories most probable about the origin of pink lemonade. Neither of them involve adding strawberry or raspberry to the mixture, as is common today, but both involve the circus. One is that red cinnamon candies were accidentally dropped into a vat of lemonade in 1912, and because there wasn't enough time to make a new batch, the lemonade was sold and became a hit. The second is that a lemonade salesman at the circus in 1857 ran out of water to make lemonade, and grabbed a tub of water that was previously used to wash a performer's pink tights. This podcast, which was originally meant as a side project for me, became my favorite thing in the world to do, and podcasting in general was something I thought about all the time. So I made the leap to editing podcasts after I got laid off. And we talked about that in the story behind the pink slip. Want to know something funny about the paperwork I got when I was let go? It actually included a paper with the title Pink Slip written on it with quotation marks around it. And the paper was white, but it's funny that it's not just slang, but an actual term that's used. So I've been editing podcasts and doing podcast consulting for a few months now, and I love it. I get to listen to podcasts all day, and today I celebrated my birthday by being a guest host on one of my favorite podcasts, She Podcast, and wearing my new hoodie from Podcaster Apparel that says Podcaster on it. And speaking of hoodies, we talked about them in the story behind hoodies. Athletes wore sweatshirts and hoodies on the sidelines to stay warm in inclement weather, and they would lend their hoodies to their girlfriends to wear. And if these girls were anything like me, they were probably pretty hesitant to give them back. To all my exes who are still looking for your hoodies, yeah, I still have them. So now I'm also starting another podcast with my friend John from the Brand X podcast about our weight loss journey called Hate to Weight. Weight spelled W-E-I-G-H-T. Basically because, I didn't mention this, but for the majority of my life, I haven't been in the greatest shape. I'm not sure why. This is the story behind Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, potato chips, pretzels, sliced bread, Pez, pie, Baby Ruth, Kit Kat, lollipops, peanut butter. Okay, maybe I know why. But I did have one episode about exercise. In 1818, a British engineer by the name of Sir William Cubitt invented the prison treadmill, also known as the tread wheel. This was exactly what it sounds like. Convicts were made to step on spokes of a large paddle wheel to generate power for tasks such as grinding corn and pumping water. Anyway, that's pretty much the story behind me and kind of the story behind the story behind. I'm your host, Emily Prokop, and this is the story behind Emily Prokop. Okay, that's enough of that. The role of Emily Prokop was played by Emily Prokop from The Story Behind. Information for this episode was sourced from past episodes of The Story Behind and a clip from my first podcast, Classy Little Podcast. And all those links can be found in the show notes at thestorybehindpodcast.com. This week on Trivia Tuesday in the Story Behind discussion group, Beckett posted that the metal gallium melts under human body temperature, and you can put a cube of metal in your hand and watch it melt. And she actually showed a picture of it melting in her hand. She was able to get it for $15 on Amazon. How awesome is that? So thanks for that, Beckett. That was so cool to see that. And if you'd like to talk about trivia you pick up during the week and have it read on the show, join the Story Behind discussion group on Facebook. This episode was brought to you by the Story Behind executive producers who support the show through the Patreon page at patreon.com/thestorybehind. Thanks for listening, and thank you for not singing the happy birthday song to me. I actually really hate it.